This is what we are making today. These scrumptious, unassuming cookies that are oh so delicious. Welcome to Philly Live. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of my favorite recipes from my grandma, and they are anise cookies. I've always been intimidated to make these cookies because they looked so perfect, to be honest. I figured it would take a lot of work to get them done. What I realized after making them is it actually doesn't take a whole lot of work to do them. What you need are dry conditions, so no humidity. Humidity is bad in this case. And you also need some time just for the cookies to sit where you have to do absolutely nothing, and they cure, which enables them to look spectacular in the end. Everything you need for the recipe is listed below. Please note that for today, I'm actually cutting the recipe in half. So any of the measurements I'll be using are half of what are listed below, just so I wouldn't make so many cookies to help manage the recipe a bit. The recipe is quite simple. It involves confectioner sugar, eggs, and anise flavoring, and then you add some flour. The most difficult part really is just finding a safe place to keep the cookies once you pipe them or spoon them out so they can cure overnight. That's really it. And you have to make sure it's not too humid, because humidity is not a good friend of these cookies. When you do these cookies right, what you'll notice is that the little cookies develop feet on the bottom, and those feet show that the process went well. Then you pop in the oven to get them lightly browned for just about 8 or 10 minutes. It's really remarkable. So I'm going to start with preparing the cookies the day before when I got the dough ready and I piped it out. Then you'll see me pop them in the oven the next morning, and then I'll be back to share some reflections about how I feel about the recipe and how they turned out after giving this wonderful old recipe a try. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get this recipe started. To start, we are going to be adding a pound of confectionery sugar or powdered sugar. Since I am cutting the recipe in half, to make a more manageable amount of eggs, I will be only putting a half pound of powdered sugar, so I have it all ready in here. And to that, I'm going to be adding 3 eggs. The original recipe, to the pound of sugar, you would add 6 eggs, but since we're having the recipe, we just have 3 eggs. I'm just going to add those to it. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of anise flavoring. Now in the recipe, and I'm actually going to add less because I forgot to have it, so I only want to do a half teaspoon now. There we go, just a half teaspoon. Let me switch that. See? Got to be thinking. Okay, and next what we're going to be doing is using the mixer to do the mixing. In the original recipe, my grandma talked about stirring together this mixture for half an hour. So we are going to use the hand mixer and do it that way instead. I'm going to start it at a low mixing speed because of the powdered sugar, otherwise it'll go everywhere. I can increase it once it gets in. I want to grab a spatula so I can work down the edges. Since it's mostly mixed right now, I want to actually work down those edges so all that sugar gets incorporated. There we go. I can smell the anise flavor. And it smells really strong now. Do not be alarmed. The flavor will be quite subtle once everything else is mixed in. And then I'm going to raise it. And I'm going to let it incorporate for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to check on it. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to stop it and show you the change that is made with this egg, sugar, and anise flavoring mixture. It's really incredible. Left to mix for, it's not even been 15 minutes yet, but it's just amazing how it has changed. So you can see, look at this mixture. It's this light yellow mixture. It is smooth, it's shiny, it's glistening, it's aerated with some bubbles. It's really quite unique. I don't know that I've ever really seen a mixture look like that. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to see that. So to this, I'm going to be adding 1 3/4 cup flour. And if I need it, I'll be adding another cup of flour. In the recipe, it says that you need to add enough flour so that it is not too stiff and not too runny. Having never made these before, I'm not really sure what that means. So we're going to figure this all out together, but not too stiff and not too runny. So let me get this back under and add the flour. I've already measured out 1 3/4 cup flour. So we'll get this back in here. I'm going to add the flour. It doesn't really say add it gradually or not, so I'm just going to add the 1 3/4 cup flour. And I have, as I mentioned, I have a 1/4 cup here set aside that I can add if it seems that it is too runny. So I'm going to be careful at my speed. I get that flour incorporated. I'm going to grab my spatula. And this dough just has this beautiful, really light yellow color. She doesn't really talk about beating it in, so I just want to make sure that I guess it's not too runny and not too stiff. So let's check it out. Let's see. So that looks kind of runny. It looks more like a cake batter. So I feel like maybe it should have a little more flour. So we're going to add a little bit more. Maybe I'll add like half of the flour that I have here, half of the 1/4 cup. Let's see what happens. Okay, I think I need to scrape down the sides a little bit. Has thickened it up a bit. So let me scrape down those sides. Now you can see it's a little bit thicker. It's not quite running off of the beaters like it was. But I certainly wish she was here and could tell me exactly the consistency, because this is the trial and error stuff that is going to be quite interesting in this feat of making these special cookies. So it just seems to me like it is a bit runny for a cookie batter. I don't think it's going to be stiff like a chocolate chip cookie batter, but I might go ahead and add the rest of the flour. It just seems a bit runny, or at least a half of this amount. Let me actually stop for a second. Add it over here. I'll add half of what's left, so I just have a little bit of flour left here. And I think this depends on humidity, things like that. Okay, I did thicken it up a bit. Let me make sure and scrape down those sides again. You can see it's holding on to the batter even more. So again, trying to achieve this thickness that my grandma would have wanted. Totally not sure what I'm looking for. So I'm going to be kind of guessing. Still seems a little bit loose. So you know what? I'm going to add the rest and call it a day and just see. Get that incorporated. Okay. So I think this is going to have to do it. So what I'm going to do first is let me get some of this off the beaters. There we go. So hopefully this will do the trick. It's really difficult, again, when you're trying to make a recipe, and this is a good thing to keep in mind after a loved one has already passed, because I really can't ask these questions. So there we go. So I'm going to show you the thickness of this one, and you'll see what all these turn out. There's a little bit of dry flour there, so I want to get that incorporated, make sure there's none on the bottom. So I'm going to scrape here. It's a really nice, light batter. So hopefully this is not too thick and not too runny, Grandma. But it looks like it might be okay. So we're going to give it a try. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to be pouring this into this glass that I put a Ziploc bag in, because I do think from what I've read on other websites of people that have made similar cookies that it is easier to kind of pipe the cookie onto the cookie sheets in those scant teaspoonfuls. I think it'll be easier doing this, and I can cut off the edge. So here you see I put my baggie in a glass to get some support, and I have the last bit of batter, the batter on the spatula. I don't want to miss any, so I'm going to get that into the bag, and it will be all set to pipe these little rounds that we're going to be piping. So when you do that, the glass again gave us some support. When you do that, you have a nice little point here that you can snip off. Okay, now we're going to get ready to get our dough put onto our cookie sheets. This is the size we're shooting for, so you can see, not big at all. Not big at all. So it's just a scant teaspoonful. I don't think I've ever piped a cookie, or really anything that was that tiny. So this is going to certainly be interesting. And in the original recipe, it shows that it yields 90 to 100 cookies. So I guess I'm shooting for about 40 to 50 cookies. Okay, so you're going to take our little, I'm going to make a pretty small hole because I really want to have some control with this. Whoop, it's all ready to go. Okay, so I'm shooting just for a teaspoon. Cool. My grandma taught me how to make tea. She taught me also to add a little bit of milk, which I know is very English, although she was Hungarian. So a little milk in the tea does it nicely. And these cookies were perfect dipping into tea. They'd also be perfect dipping into coffee. Here's to you, Grandma. So some reflections. I will say that the cookies did not turn out exactly how I remember them from my grandma. Even though on the recipe she said drop them into scant teaspoonfuls, which I'm a rule follower, so I was very much trying to do, I noticed they were much smaller. But since I had only made them this first time, I didn't know if there was going to be any spreading or rising that was going to occur with the dough. Since there wasn't, they turned out a lot smaller. My grandma's were probably about twice the size of the ones that I made. Also, my grandma's cookies were much denser. They were actually a little hard to bite into, and so that's why I loved having them with tea, because the tea would soften them up. The other thing I noticed in my grandma's cookies is that the top, this top part that looks like frosting, was perfectly smooth. She didn't have any of the showing of the piping, and she might have not piped them herself. She might have just used a spoon, but there was no texture there. It was completely smooth. So that leads me to believe that while in her recipe she said to make the batter not too runny but not too thick, I think that she probably would have added less flour. Remember, there is a 1/4 cup that you have some play with. And so the next time I make them, I think I'll make them a little more runny and see if I can achieve that smooth top. Now, I have to say that I actually think that this top is really pretty. So I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just curious if that'll change more things about the cookie. The other thing I noticed with my cookies is they definitely aren't as dense. And so I'm wondering if it's a thinner batter, will that actually make a harder cookie? And I'm kind of thinking there's sometimes I might want it to be a super hard cookie, like more like a biscotti, but there's something really delightful about these little drops of wonder because they're not super dense. So I think that's where we as a cook can kind of decide what we're going for, what we're shooting for. But certainly if I want the memories of the cookies as my grandma made them, they would be bigger, they'd be smoother, and they'd be denser. So down below, please let me know if you've ever tried a recipe like this for these German Anise cookies, and I can't say how it's pronounced, so you'll just have to look at the spelling below. And if you do try to make them, how did yours turn out? And what would you do differently? So I do read all comments below. I really appreciate you joining us today, and I can't wait to hear how this goes for you. Remember, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Once a month, I always try to share one of my grandma's recipes, and I have them on a playlist on my homepage, so don't miss it. Also, if you want to hear more about me as a foodie and different things that are going on, as well as some weekly meals or cocktails I'm making, please be sure to find me on Twitter under Philly Live and make sure and follow. So thank you again, and I appreciate you spending this afternoon with me.